Hey everybody, Wildman Wes, and welcome to the Worst State of Movies, where we look at 50 movies from the United States, made in each state, and we decide whether or not they are considered worthy of the title being the worst. Let's see where we go to today. We now travel to the south, to the state of Mississippi. And I need to preface something before this review. The movie in question is considered controversial on some aspects. That being said, we're moving on with this review of 2014's Sound and Fury. This movie is about a family that lives on a plantation in the 1850s where there are three brothers and a sister that go through highs and lows of complete depressing nature. And they break it down into three stories. First story is about a young man named Benji in his early 30s who has a bit of a mental disability. He is very simple in his nature and he has a very fondness for his sister Caddy. And he has a lot of flashbacks of when they were younger and how much she protected him from when his other two brothers, Quentin and Jason, were bullying him and making him feel bad about being the way he is. As we go back into present day, we find out that Caddy is going to be getting married one day, and she is with this young man named Dalton, and he sees them kissing, and he gets in trouble for being a supposed peeping Tom. And a lot of this story deals with his struggle to maintain some form of humanity while society makes him feel less than that, to the point where his family starts questioning whether or not he needs to be institutionalized, and even the possibility of castration comes into place, because during that time period when people weren't considered normal, they would take steps and means to make sure that said person may not become a threat later on down the line if any type of behavior becomes extreme. So that's the first story. We're going to move on to the second story with another brother named Quentin. This brother definitely has that nepotism situation of whether or not he is going to be good enough for the name of the family. So that's the first story. Moving on to the second story on the brother named Quentin. This is the considered Nepo baby, the one who's going to have the bright future and do a lot with his life. He's going to Harvard, and he has his father's watch. This feels something along the lines of Pulp Fiction, but we're not going to get into that one today, are we? Quentin is battling with a lot of memories of his father, talking about this jaded philosophy of victory being simply nothing more than an illusion. And no matter what you do, it doesn't matter because there's always going to be someone better than you that's going to bring you down. And as Quentin's at Harvard, he plans to go work at a bank that is owned by the father of Caddy's now fiance, Herbert, and a lot of issues come into play because Quentin finds out that Herbert and his father are complete frauds. They are not who they say they are. This bank is going to have a lot of problems down the line. And not only that, Quentin also notices that Herbert is not very good to Caddy. And he also notices that Caddy is pregnant. And Caddy gives a more confession to Quentin about the situation, that the child is not Herbert's, but her previous boyfriend, Dalton. When Quentin goes to approach Dalton and say, "Do you know all about this?" Dalton gets a little bit upset about the fact that he's being cornered and wants nothing to do with the situation. And there's a big scuffle and threats on each other's lives. Quentin, at one point, feeling defeated, sees this young girl in town and sees that she's by herself. He doesn't know where her parents are. And he befriends her, he gets her some treats, and then sends her on her way just to feel that he has a friend, somebody in this world. Well, eventually, he sees the little girl again, and he walks her to her home. Her father comes out and starts assuming that she has been abducted, and she gets pushed aside, and the father starts to attack Quentin. Fast forward a little bit, Quentin has been completely broken, to the point where he walks to the side of a bridge, puts some irons onto his feet, and jumps into the river. Now it's time to talk about the third and final story of the last brother, Jason, the worst of them all. He has a very, very conflicting life with his daughter Dilsey, as well as his wife, who, for the most part, is inebriated a lot and really wants nothing to do with him. And he is battling this whole situation of why he will never be enough or why he has to be put in a bad situation. Here's the bad situation that we have to talk about. Dilsey is not actually Jason's daughter. She is actually the orphaned daughter of Caddy because of the fact that being a single mother back then or having a child out of wedlock back in the 1850s, that was a bad thing. Though Caddy really wants to make amends and financially give money to Jason for Dilsey, he really doesn't give her the money. He keeps it to himself. And he wants Caddy to never see her daughter again because of the whole controversy regarding a child out of wedlock. When we first see Dilsey, she definitely seems kind of that rebel child that has that butting heads with their parents. I should know this completely, butting heads with my own parents when I was a kid, and I'm sure my kid's gonna butt heads with me at some point, but I digress. When Dilsey finds out the truth about Jason not being her father and pretty much hoarding all the money that her mother was giving her, she finds a way to get out and go and marry into money at some point. Jason, fuming over this with narcissistic rage, goes and tries to find the sheriff to see if he can get her back. The sheriff denies him any of that situation. We move on later to the cemetery where family members are being laid to rest, and Jason has to accept the fact that he's lost power, he's lost everything, including family members. And the movie just kind of fizzles after that in the last few minutes of meaning or what did we learn from this. There is no conclusion, there is no closure. We now move into the episode segment where I talk about what I like and what I don't like about this film. We're going to talk about what I don't like first, since I know a lot of times I tend to talk about what I like first and then what I don't like after. We're going to flip-flop it this time. What I don't like about this film, as I mentioned at the end of this rundown that I gave you, there was no real closure on a lot of this movie. It really sunk into me, it really bugged me, because in a lot of movies, especially dramas, you really you need that closure. You almost expect it to happen, that at some point someone's going to see the error of their ways and they're going to learn to move on or better themselves. In this situation, nobody does. People either end up passing away, dying in the most gruesome ways imaginable, or they just shrug their shoulders and say, oh well, and move on to the next people to wreak havoc upon. That's basically what I can say about that. Another part of this is I feel that the movie is a little bit longer than it should be. This movie definitely goes past that 2-hour mark, and especially when it comes to the stories that are involved. I almost thought that this was going to be more of like an anthology movie, where it was 3 different stories about 3 different characters that somehow they coincide with each other. However, with it being family members, that makes it a little bit more skewed in a way. Now, it doesn't take away anything from it, it's just with anthology movies, you have to be very, very careful on your time limit per story. In this one, they really didn't put a lot of importance on specific ones. Usually the story that has the most importance has the longer time frame out of the rest. In this one, I really didn't know who to invest more emotion into, whether it be Benji or Jason or Quentin, or even Caddy for that matter. Caddy, it was almost more of like an afterthought or the red herring throughout this whole entire movie. And that's where I got very confused on where my emotions and where my attention needed to be more invested. Moving away from the things that I don't like, we're going to talk about what I like. It might be a little bit limited, however, it is what it is. The cast alone does a fairly decent job of portraying the story and conveying the story. We have James Franco, we have Jacob Loeb, we have Joey King, we have Seth Rogen and Nick Frost, as well as countless other people in this ensemble piece. Their energy, as well as their emotions that they pour into each character, do tell the stories rather well. However, as I mentioned, with time limit per story, it can drag on a little bit. However, I do appreciate what they did. We now come to the part where I grade this film on whether or not it is the worst movie made in Mississippi. Now, going off of what I said about what I didn't like about some of the pacing and time limits on each story, as well as the just complete, almost soprano fade to black style of an ending, and then also the performances of the cast being as well as they could do in that time frame, I want to say inconclusive, because rewatchability-wise, I would say no on one hand because of how long this movie is, with my attention span droning on a little bit. However, I do give it that tiny little glimmer of hope that maybe I might watch it another time to see if maybe I missed something. However, I do have to go with how I'm feeling at the moment, and Sound and Fury, I'm gonna have to say, you're not. You're not. I normally would say you are, because with my attention span, but the fact of the matter is, when I mentioned that rewatchability, that is a big criteria for this review and all the other reviews that we do for this series. Because if it's not rewatchable, or even if it's not rewatchable for one time to see maybe if you missed something that would make the plot more pivotal, that is what I'm looking at. And I know in this series I try to do more comedic things, making jokes about movies that I don't like. However, I realize I've become more of a cynic in my life than I'd care to be, and it's time to actually be a little bit more mature and responsible about what I deliver to you, the viewers, on a review. I mean, yeah, we love to have funny moments and crack jokes, but at the same time, in a movie like this being as serious as it is, we kind of have to be a little bit more serious for it. Well, we hope you enjoyed this little soapbox moment of reviewing Sound and Fury. If you've seen this movie and you agree with me, leave a thumbs up. And if not, hey, I understand. This movie definitely isn't for everybody. And for me personally, it's not necessarily my complete cup of tea. But I will appreciate it for the things that it tried to convey. Other than that, make sure you share on social media, but most importantly, you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for instant updates. Until then, I'm Wildman Wes, and we will see you next time here on Dragonfire Entertainment. Take care.